It all began one chilly November evening in 2011 when I met Amy at a work event in downtown Seattle. I was 35 then, a few years past the turbulence of my first marriage, which had ended amicably, but left me with a quiet longing for something real. I didn't expect much that night, just a routine networking event. But when I spotted Amy across the room, something in the way she laughed caught my attention. She was 32, recently separated from her husband, and trying to figure out life as a single mother to a 6-year-old boy named Ethan. Amy was a marketing consultant, trying to juggle her demanding job with the reality of raising a child on her own. I wasn't wealthy by any stretch, but I was comfortable. I worked as a software developer, had a decent house in a good neighborhood, a solid savings plan, and a reliable car. My first marriage had ended when I was in my late 20s. No kids, just a mutual understanding that we were going in different directions. I wanted stability, she wanted excitement, and we parted ways with respect, no hard feelings. I wasn't lonely, but I knew something was missing. When I saw Amy that night, with her tired yet warm smile, something clicked. It wasn't just the way she looked at me, it was the quiet strength I saw in her. She wasn't complaining about her life, she was just doing the best she could, like so many others. We exchanged small talk at first, but before long, it became clear that we were both escaping something in our own ways. Amy didn't speak much about her ex-husband, but when she did, there was a sadness behind her words. I learned that she'd been doing most of the parenting on her own, and while Greg, Ethan's biological father, would occasionally come around with extravagant gifts, he never stuck around long enough to be a stable presence in Ethan's life. I respected Amy for that, for holding it all together, even though she looked worn down by the effort. She didn't seem like she was waiting for a hero. She was just a woman doing what needed to be done. We started talking more, and over the following months, I found myself drawn to her in ways I hadn't expected. There was an ease in being around her. No pretensions, just two people trying to find their way. Amy wasn't looking for someone to rescue her. She needed a partner, someone who would be there. I admired that. And Ethan, well, he was adorable in his own way, like most 6-year-olds, full of imagination and energy, always talking about his adventures with his toys. The first time I met him, he was in mismatched socks, holding a toy spaceship, and he looked up at me with these wide eyes and asked, "Are you my new dad?" I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled and ruffled his hair. It was an innocent question, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of protectiveness. A few months later, I found myself thinking about them more and more. Amy was patient, kind, and hardworking, someone I could picture building a future with. Ethan had a way of drawing you in, even at his young age, with his sense of wonder and trust. It wasn't long before I knew I wanted to be part of their lives, for real. I proposed to Amy one evening after a quiet dinner. There was no grand gesture, just a simple, heartfelt moment between the three of us. She cried when I asked, and when Ethan handed me a sign that said, "Will you be my dad?" It felt like the world shifted. It wasn't just a proposal, it was a promise to them, a promise to build a family together. We got married quietly a few months later, just a small ceremony at a park with close friends and family. Ethan, of course, was the ring bearer, wearing a little suit that he could barely keep straight. The moment he walked down the aisle, holding up the rings with pride, I felt something shift inside me. This was real. This was what I'd been waiting for. Amy stood up to thank everyone during the reception, and when she spoke, she said that I had given them both a chance at a fresh start. She said I was the rock they needed. I didn't know what to say at first. I wasn't sure I deserved that much credit, but when I looked at Amy, when I saw Ethan sitting beside us, I realized she was right. I was the person they were going to lean on, and in return, I would lean on them. The first few years were the best I could have hoped for. I sold my bachelor pad, and we moved into a 4-bedroom house. It was in a great school district, with a large backyard where Ethan could run around. Amy decided to stay home full-time to be with Ethan, and I supported that choice completely. I knew that if I was going to be part of their lives, I needed to show up every day. So I did. I helped with the household chores, made dinner when I could, and spent hours coaching Ethan's soccer team. He started calling me Dad within the first year, and at first it felt strange, But eventually, it felt natural. I thought this was it, the family I had always wanted. I helped Ethan with his homework, stayed up late with him when he was sick, and cheered him on from the sidelines at every game. There was no greater joy than seeing him succeed. It wasn't perfect, of course. Amy and I had our share of disagreements, mostly about money. She had a tendency to spend faster than I could keep track, and I'd try to suggest a budget, but she'd get defensive saying I was controlling. We'd argue, but then we'd make up. That was marriage. It wasn't always easy, but we worked through it. Or so I thought. Then, when Ethan hit 14, things started to change. He became distant. He didn't talk to me as much, didn't want to hang out as much. I tried to keep our communication open, but he always had plans with his friends. Amy reassured me it was just typical teenage stuff, that he needed space. But I knew it was more than that. I started to feel like a stranger in my own home. It wasn't just teenage rebellion, it was something else. And I didn't know how to fix it. Looking back now, I realized that was when I started losing him. And I didn't even know it yet. By the time Ethan turned 16, the changes were impossible to ignore. It wasn't just the usual teenage mood swings or the occasional eye roll. It was deeper than that. He became distant in a way I hadn't expected. The warm, eager boy who used to share everything with me, who would ask me for help with his homework and talk about his day, was now pulling away. I'd ask him about school, about his friends, and I'd get one-word answers. Fine, okay, or I don't know, were all I could get from him. When I suggested we spend some time together, maybe catch a movie or grab a bite to eat, he always had an excuse or a plan with friends. I figured it was normal. He was a teenager after all, trying to figure out who he was. But something didn't sit right. It was as if the closer he got to adulthood, the further he was from me. I'd been his father figure for so long, and I thought our bond was solid. Yet here I was, trying to reach out to him, and it felt like I was being pushed away. Amy noticed too, but she kept brushing it off, saying it was just him finding his independence. She assured me that everything was fine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping through my fingers. Then Greg came back into the picture. Greg was Ethan's biological father, but he'd been mostly absent from Ethan's life for years. I knew he had a history of coming around every so often, spoiling Ethan with expensive gifts, but never really sticking around to offer the steady guidance that a father should. He was unreliable, and I'd always felt like he was more interested in being Ethan's fun dad rather than the one who would actually be there when it mattered. But a few years ago, Greg had started to turn things around. He had a steady job now and was in a committed relationship with a woman named Clara. When he reached out to reconnect with Ethan, I didn't see any harm in it. I wanted Ethan to have a healthy relationship with his biological father, so I supported it, thinking it would be good for him to have a father figure he could learn from, even if Greg had been out of the picture for so long. At first, I thought Ethan spending weekends with Greg was a healthy way for them to reconnect. I never once imagined how much it would affect our relationship. The more Ethan spent time with Greg, the more I noticed him distancing himself from me. The change was subtle at first, but then it became undeniable. He started talking about how much more fun Greg was, how Greg didn't have all the rules I had, no curfews, no limits on how long he could stay out with his friends. I'd raised Ethan with structure, with the understanding that rules and boundaries were there to help him grow. But now he was telling me that Greg didn't make him follow any of those rules. It stung. It wasn't just the casual comments that hurt. It was the way he started treating me. Ethan stopped calling me Dad. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake, a slip of the tongue, but it happened again and again. "Leo, can you pass the salt?" he'd say at dinner. "Leo, I'm going to bed." It felt like a slap in the face each time. It wasn't just the name change. It was the recognition that I wasn't really his father anymore. Not in his eyes. I tried to talk to Amy about it, but she kept telling me I was overreacting. "He's just going through something," she would say. "He's a teenager, Leo. You need to give him some space." But it wasn't just that. It was the way Ethan looked at me, like I was an outsider. The way he would ask about Greg in front of me, as if I wasn't even there. The way he would talk about how much better things were at Greg's place. I felt like I was being erased from his life. A few months ago, I tried to sit down with Ethan and talk about it. I wanted to understand what was going on in his head. I told him I noticed he'd stopped calling me Dad, and I asked him if something had changed. He looked at me blankly, as if he didn't understand why it mattered. "You're not my real dad," he said. "Greg is. You're just the guy who married Mom." Those words hit me harder than anything. I wasn't his real dad. All those years of raising him, of being there for him, of loving him like he was my own, none of it mattered. I wasn't his real dad. It was like all the moments we'd shared, the quiet talks, the soccer games, the help with homework, had been erased in a matter of seconds. I felt like I was standing in the middle of a room, shouting, but no one could hear me. I was crushed. But what hurt more was Amy's response. She didn't get angry with Ethan. She didn't even seem surprised. She just said, "He's still figuring things out, Leo. Don't take it personally." I wanted to scream, to tell her how much it hurt, how much I'd sacrificed for all of us, but I didn't. Instead, I just nodded and walked away. What else was there to say? It wasn't until Ethan's 18th birthday that I finally realized how much things had changed. We threw a big party for him at a restaurant, decorations, catering, the works. I had been planning it for weeks, making sure every detail was perfect. But when Ethan opened the gift from Greg, a brand new car, the whole room erupted into applause. It was this shiny, expensive thing, and everyone was focused on Greg, praising him for being such a generous father. I had gotten Ethan a new laptop for college and a check to help with textbooks, practical, thoughtful gifts. But compared to the car, my gifts felt small, almost insignificant. The applause, the attention, it all went to Greg, and for a moment I felt invisible. Later that night, after most of the guests had left, I found Amy and Greg talking to me in a quiet corner. They were calm, almost too calm. Amy told me that Ethan had made it clear he wanted Greg to be his primary father figure moving forward. She said that it might be easier for all of us if I stepped back. It was like someone had punched me in the gut. They were asking me to leave, to walk away from the family I had given everything to. Greg, standing there with his smug, self-assured smile, said, "You've been a good stepdad, Leo, but Ethan wants me to be the one in his life now. I think it's best for everyone if you just step back." I couldn't believe it. I had raised this kid. I had been there for him in ways Greg never had. And now, just like that, I was supposed to step aside and let Greg take over? I didn't say much in that moment. I just walked away, numb. I knew then that I wasn't part of their future anymore. Everything I'd done for them, every sacrifice I'd made, meant nothing. And that's when I knew I had to leave. For my own peace of mind, for my own future, I had to walk away. The days after Ethan's 18th birthday felt like a blur. I was numb, moving through the motions of my life, but not really living in it. The weight of what had happened, what they had asked me to do, sat heavy on my chest. I'd given them everything, every ounce of my time, every bit of my heart, and it was all so easily dismissed. It wasn't just the words Ethan had said that hurt. It was the way he said them, as if I had never meant anything more to him than a financial backer or a convenience. He wanted Greg to be his father, and Amy, despite everything we had been through together, sided with him. I knew, deep down, I couldn't stay. I was no longer welcome in that home, and I didn't want to live in a place where my presence was a burden. Amy's passive acceptance of Ethan's rejection, her failure to stand up for me, made it clear that I wasn't truly part of the family anymore. The emotional betrayal was almost worse than the financial one. But in that moment, it felt like both had come to a head. I had been replaced, not just by Greg, but by the idea of what he could offer, a more carefree, less responsible version of fatherhood. Ethan, who I had raised and loved as my own, had moved on, and Amy was right behind him. They were a family without me. It wasn't immediate that I made the decision to leave. I spent the first few days just walking around the house, aimlessly going from room to room, trying to figure out what I should do. But as I looked around, I realized that every part of this house, every corner, every object, every piece of furniture had been bought and paid for by me. I had worked long hours to provide this life for them. I had sacrificed weekends, missed family events, and put my own desires on hold to give them the best I could. And now, I was nothing more than an obstacle in their way. I started making calls. The first was to my real estate lawyer, Stephen. I'd known Stephen for years. worked with him on a few property deals. I wasn't sure how this was going to play out legally, but I needed to be sure I was covered. "I need to sell the house," I told him when he answered. "I want to make sure the sale is fast and clean." He could hear the frustration in my voice, and after a few moments of back and forth, he agreed to help me get everything in order. I hadn't told Amy yet. Part of me still wanted to believe that this could be fixed, that she would see reason, that she would tell Ethan that he couldn't just dismiss me like this. But deep down, I knew better. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I wasn't just being rejected by Ethan. I was being rejected by Amy too. She had made her choice, and now I had to make mine. The next day, I called my financial advisor, Patricia. We'd worked together for years, managing my retirement accounts and investments. I needed to make some changes. "Patricia," I said when she picked up the phone, "I need to close the college fund I set up for Ethan. I'm removing him as a beneficiary from everything." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Are you sure about this, Leo?" she asked, carefully. "I know how much that meant to you. Are you sure you want to do this?" I didn't hesitate. "I'm sure," I said, my voice firm. "Ethan doesn't want me in his life anymore. He made that clear, and I've done enough. The money is now part of my future." Patricia, to her credit, didn't argue. She just agreed to start the paperwork. It felt like I was cutting off my last tie to them, but it also felt like I was taking back control of my life. By the time I had finished speaking with Patricia, I was already on the phone with real estate agents. I wanted this house sold quickly, no complications. Within hours, I had 3 different agents sending me competitive market analyses, all with estimates higher than I expected. I knew the house was valuable, but I hadn't anticipated how quickly I could unload it. One agent, a woman named Karen, promised to handle everything efficiently, from listing the property to managing the sale. She told me she could have the house on the market within the day. I agreed, signing the papers and preparing for the next chapter. I hadn't told Amy yet. I didn't know how to break it to her. The night after I signed the papers, I found myself sitting in the living room, staring at the empty space where the family photos used to be. Ethan had taken a few of the pictures down recently, and I didn't know what that meant at the time, but I knew now. He had already started to pull away, to erase the family he no longer wanted. I could feel the weight of those pictures, the memories, the life I had built here, slipping through my fingers. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't change the reality of what was happening. The next morning, I finally told Amy. She wasn't at home when I made the decision to sell the house, but when she returned, she found the for sale sign out front. She walked into my office, her face tight with confusion. "What is that doing in our yard?" she demanded, her voice rising. I didn't look up from my laptop. "I'm selling the house, just like you asked." "What do you mean? Just like I asked?" Her tone was sharp, her eyes searching mine for an explanation. "We never asked you to sell the house, Leo. We asked you to move out so Greg could move in." I turned to face her then, slowly taking in her angry expression, the way her eyes shifted nervously. "This is my house, Amy. I bought it before we got married. You have no claim to it. I'm selling it, and I'm using the proceeds to secure my retirement. You want me to disappear from your life? Fine, but I'm not going to fund your new life while I do it." Amy stood frozen, her face pale, her eyes flicking between disbelief and anger. "You can't be serious. Where are we supposed to live?" I leaned back in my chair, my voice calm but firm. "That's between you and Greg. I'm sure between his new job and your marketing career, you'll be able to figure it out. I've done enough." She stared at me, her face crumpling as the reality of the situation sank in. "Leo, please don't do this. We can work things out. Madison was just being emotional. She didn't mean all of that." But I didn't need to hear it. I had already made my decision. I wasn't going to stick around to be the man who had been discarded when they no longer had use for me. I had given them every opportunity to appreciate me. They chose not to. The house was sold 2 weeks later, the closing went through smoothly, and I walked away with just over $650,000 after paying off the mortgage and covering the closing costs. I had already moved out by then, leaving behind everything that wasn't mine. Furniture Amy had picked out, artwork, the kitchen appliances, everything that had once made the house a home. I took only what was mine, what I had worked for before I ever met her. The first night I spent in my new place was quiet. A small, downtown apartment, nothing extravagant, but comfortable. No memories, no distractions. I went to bed, finally at peace, knowing I was free. The weeks after I moved out felt surreal. I had spent the first few days just getting settled into my new apartment, small, but clean and modern. It was the first time in years I wasn't waking up in a home that was full of reminders of the family I had once fought so hard to build. For the first time in a long time, I could hear my own thoughts without the constant hum of someone else's expectations. I didn't have to worry about the bills, the arguments, the disappointments. It was quiet. It was peaceful. But peace, I soon realized, didn't come without its price. The days were easy to fill. Work was the same, my schedule was full, and I had no one to answer to. But as the weeks wore on, the reality of what I had done started to sink in. I had walked away. I had closed the door on the life I thought I would have forever. I had no one to call for dinner plans, no one to complain about the stress of the week, no one who would ask me how my day was or how I felt, and most of all, no one to tell me that I mattered. I never told anyone what had really happened. I didn't share the details with my colleagues, my friends, or even my family. The truth was, I wasn't sure how to explain it. How do you tell people that you gave everything for a family that decided you weren't needed anymore? How do you explain the crushing weight of being told in no uncertain terms that your love, your effort, your sacrifice, all of it, wasn't enough? People always assume that if a man walks away from a family, it's because he didn't try hard enough or that he didn't care enough. But I had tried, with everything I had, and I still wasn't enough. I didn't hear from Amy or Ethan for the first few weeks. I knew Amy was still working through the aftermath of everything. Maybe she was in denial, maybe she was just too embarrassed to reach out, but I never expected her to contact me first. I don't think I would have known what to say if she had. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just tired. Tired of the emotional manipulation, tired of being the one who always gave and gave, only to have everything I did turned into something I was supposed to do. I wanted her to feel the weight of the decision she'd made. I wanted her to realize that when you push someone out of your life, you lose something valuable in the process. But the truth is, I don't think she would ever understand that. I never saw Ethan after I moved out. I had left him a letter with a check for $5,000, a small token of the money I had spent over the years providing for him. I left a note explaining why I was doing what I was doing, how I felt rejected, and how I had no choice but to take care of myself. I wasn't looking for an apology, but I knew that when he grew up, he'd realize what he had lost. He might not understand now, but I hoped he would one day. I knew that even if I never heard from him again, I had done what was right for me. I had to walk away to save myself. That night, I sat on the edge of my new bed, staring at the blank walls, thinking about everything I had done for them. I didn't regret a single moment of the love I gave, but I regretted letting myself believe that the love I gave would be enough. I wanted to believe in the idea of family so badly, but it wasn't enough to make up for the fact that, in the end, they didn't appreciate it. I had tried so hard to be the man they needed, but in the end, they needed someone else, and I wasn't that person anymore. Then, one afternoon a few months later, I ran into Ethan. I hadn't expected to see him, and honestly, I wasn't sure what I'd say if I did. I was standing in a coffee shop downtown getting my usual black coffee, no frills, when I heard a voice behind me. "Leo?" I turned around, and there he was. Ethan, standing in front of me with a look of surprise and maybe a little bit of apprehension. He was wearing a coffee shop apron, his hair a little longer than it had been when I last saw him. He was a little older, a little more worn, but still the same Ethan. The same boy who once called me Dad, who looked at me with trust and admiration. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't angry, but I wasn't sure how to react. I had spent so much time thinking about this moment, but now that it was here, I felt strangely empty. "Ethan," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I didn't expect to see you here." He shifted uncomfortably, like he didn't know what to say either. "Yeah, I work here now, just trying to figure things out." I nodded. I could see that he was struggling. He wasn't the confident, sure-of-himself kid I'd raised. He was a young adult now, lost and unsure of where he was going. It felt like a lifetime ago that I had been the one to help him with his homework, to guide him through life's little challenges. And now, he was just trying to make sense of it all. There was an awkward silence between us, the kind of silence that comes when you realize there are years of unsaid things between you. Finally, Ethan spoke. I'm sorry for everything, Leo. For how things went down, for everything I said. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to reach out, to tell him that I understood, that it was okay. But the other part of me, the part that had been hurt so deeply, held me back. Apologies don't pay for college, Ethan, I said quietly, almost without thinking. You know, all those years I spent taking care of you, all the sacrifices I made, none of it mattered, did it? Not to you. You wanted Greg, and I wasn't him. You made that choice. His face fell, and I saw the guilt in his eyes. It was real, but it didn't change anything. I know, he said, his voice small. I didn't understand then. I was angry, and I didn't know who I was. I shouldn't have treated you that way. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Regret, disappointment, but also some semblance of peace. I wasn't sure what I had hoped for, but I wasn't looking for an apology. I had made my peace with the fact that my place in his life had ended. Well, I said, taking a deep breath, it's done. You've got your dad now, and I've got my future to focus on. Just remember that sometimes people who care for you don't always get the credit they deserve, and I wasn't the one who let you down. I turned to leave, but before I did, I left a generous tip on the counter. Ethan stood there for a moment, looking at the money, looking at me, but not saying another word. As I walked out of the coffee shop, I didn't look back. It was over. And somehow, I was okay with it. In life, it's essential to recognize that no matter how much you give to others, your worth is not determined by what you can provide for them. People may take you for granted, and when that happens, it's crucial to know when to walk away. Protect your emotional and financial well-being. Give to those you love, but never lose sight of yourself in the process. Don't be afraid to prioritize your future over relationships that no longer serve you. It's easy to get caught up in the idea of family or the desire to be needed. But remember, respect and appreciation should be mutual. When you pour everything into a situation, be sure to see it returned, not just in what you give, but in how you are treated. And if that respect isn't there, it's okay to step back and let go. Walking away doesn't make you weak, it makes you strong for choosing yourself. Never let anyone convince you that your sacrifices don't matter. Sometimes, the hardest thing you'll ever do is to let go, but it's also the most empowering choice you can make for your own peace and future. Don't settle for being someone else's backup plan.